Okay. Alright, so thanks to everybody for coming. My name is Dr. Brian Nolan. I'm a lecturer in the School of Computing at the Dublin Institute of Technology here. I'm also a graduate of the School of Computing. I did a degree here, a master's degree, and then I did a PhD here in music retrieval systems. Currently I'm teaching a subject called Game Engines in the 4th year of the BSc Computer Science course. And the Game Engines subject is basically all about the mathematics and physics programming behind 3D computer games. And I've been teaching this subject since 2006. And the subject is, in my opinion, is the most interesting and fun way to learn computer science is by actually studying how computer games work. And interestingly, all the maths and physics you're doing for the Leaving Cert or for the Junior Cert, which year are you guys in? 4th year, okay. So all of that you'll suddenly find, oh my goodness, I can make things explode. I can make spaceships fly. I can perform magic. You know, that's basically what the ability to do maths and physics actually gives you, right? And so I've always been interested in 3D graphics and in simulation and about basically getting inside these imaginary worlds inside a computer. And just this summer I acquired a piece of hardware called the Oculus Rift. Has anyone heard of the Oculus Rift? How many people own one? You haven't? Oh, okay. You're all going to have one within 5 years, I predict. Because they're probably the most exciting thing that's happened in computer science, probably since the invention of the iPhone. It's really going to transform how we interact with computers, right? So I wanted to give you a little bit of a talk about a project that I was working on over the summer. And this is basically to try and create a little virtual world with physics and skeletal tracking. So that you put the Oculus Rift on, and it tracks your position, tracks your orientation, and places you inside a 3D computer simulated world, right? So, but first of all, I think maybe for the first half of this talk, I'll just give you a little bit of background information about the whole area of virtual reality and how I think a lot of the technologies that we use today and the technologies you guys are going to use when you graduate, and if you come to study computer science, you know, the technologies that you're going to use are really inspired by human imagination and about the potential for human imagination. So, this is a definition from a very famous computer scientist and a man that thinks a lot about what impact technology has on our lives, a guy called Jason Euler. And he has this idea that technology is really, it's the realization of our imagination. So we imagine things. We imagine that we're able to move great distances. So we invent the car. We imagine that we're able to communicate over great distances, and therefore we invent the telephone in order to facilitate that imagination. And we have these imaginary worlds in our head, right? We're able to imagine these situations, and for thousands of years, people have been writing books, you know, creating fantasy worlds. And so this technology with the virtual reality is going to enable those fantasy worlds to become real. So when I was a little boy, we had talking computers and self-driving cars. Does anybody know what that is from? That's Knight Rider. How many people have seen Knight Rider? So I was very excited by Knight Rider when I was a little boy. And really I thought Knight Rider was great because it had this talking computer and the car could drive by itself. But now we've got this. Has anyone seen this thing? This is a self-driving car. And there's a prediction that by 2035 there'll be more self-driving cars in the world than there are cars that need people to drive them. Isn't that an amazing statistic? So the fact is, by the time you guys learn to drive, you mightn't even need to anymore. You'll just sit in your car and just tell your car where you want to go and it will figure out the best way. I don't know about you, but I find that really amazing and astounding. Do you not find that astounding? I find it astounding. Yeah, and we also had talking computers as well. Of course, you had Knight Rider. And now, of course, I can take my phone out and I can ask it a question and it will answer back. And the next version of the Xbox, which is launched today, this also is speech controlled using the Kinect. So you can control and interact with your Xbox using the Kinect, right? We also had this guy. Anybody ever see this guy? Yeah. So this is probably way before your time. This was a TV program from the 1970s called The $6 Million Man. And the $6 Million Man was an astronaut who was injured in a crash. And so they rebuilt him. He was bionic. That was an example of his bionic arm. And then you look at this. And these are examples of real bionics. So the FDA in America, Food and Drug Administration, has just approved the first real bionic eye. And that's an example of a man who's got an implant of a real bionic eye. It's the first generation of real bionics. And then these are some screenshots. These people, you see the lady who's smiling and the other gentleman there? They're paraplegics. They can't walk. So they're wearing an exoskeleton, and the exoskeleton enables them to walk again. So all this is happening in technology, and you can see how technology is inspired by, our imagination of what the potential is. And so this guy was also very important to me when I was a kid. Who's ever seen this? This is Buck Rogers in the 25th century. So Buck Rogers was an astronaut, and he got frozen in space, went forward into the 25th century, and then had loads of adventures. But interestingly, 2 years ago at Science Week, I got to meet Colonel Greg Rogers, who was actually a real astronaut. And he was one of the last pilots to fly a spaceship to the International Space Station. He flew the space shuttle. Colonel Greg Johnson was his name, and I got to meet him. And then, of course, we have the Mars rover walking around on Mars, doing all kinds of experiments and discovering water and the potential for life on other planets. So a lot of the technologies you see that are inspired by our imagination of what's the potential of, what we might potentially do with technology. Eventually this stuff becomes real. And then of course robots, right? So we don't have any robots at the moment. We've got lots of toy robots. We're really in the infancy in terms of where robotics is going to be by the time you guys become adults. But there are real robots, and you can go and buy real robots like that one up there. It's called a Roomba. They're not very popular in Ireland, but they're incredibly popular in America. You don't have to hoover your house anymore. You buy a Roomba, and the Roomba drives around and hoovers the house for you. Would anyone like one of those? I think it'd be pretty cool to have a Roomba. Also, have you seen Big Dog? You should look at Big Dog on the internet. Big Dog is a scary robot, a scary military robot on 4 legs. And I did read a statistic this morning, and it said that within the next 10 years, there will be more robot soldiers fighting on battlefields in the world than there will be human soldiers. That's a scary thought. Robots going around with guns that can shoot people. Where have we seen that before? What movies? Terminator. It's coming true. And that's a drone. So drones are at the moment flying above our heads, maybe not in Ireland, but all around the world. Drones are flying around, and they are, firing missiles, firing rockets, doing all kinds of reconnaissance. When I was a kid, we used to watch, this movie came out in 1980. Has anyone seen this movie before? It's called Tron. So the sort of sequel to Tron came out a couple of years back, right? Tron was a really interesting movie because it was about a man who basically went inside a computer. And here's a short little movie clip from Tron.
The computer, an extension of the human intellect. The Ancom 511, center of the most calculating intelligence on Earth, programmed by master control to survive by all means. Soon, the ultimate tool will become the ultimate enemy. I still do not understand why you want to break into the system.
Because, man, somewhere in one of these memories is the evidence. The AA is the big master control program that we've been talking about.
Kevin Flynn, computer genius. Taken prisoner and held captive within the digital world of the computer itself. Trapped inside an electronic arena where love and escape do not compute.
Okay, I'm going to skip on here because a lot of things I want to talk to you. But interestingly, people have been trying to solve this problem of getting people inside these imaginary worlds for quite a while. And this is the first example of a virtual reality system. This was developed in 1962 by a guy called Gordon Hellig, and it's called the Sensorama. And interestingly, the Sensorama still exists, and it still works. It had stereoscopic 3D vision, and it also had these fans which blew wind in your face, and you could do different experiences like riding a bicycle through different cities, and you'd see the stereo image projected. You'd have little fans blowing wind in your face. It even had a smell-o-vision thing. So it would give you smells based on where you were going in this little virtual reality. This was built in 1962. And then in 1968, Ivan Sutherland invented something which was to really become the hallmark of virtual reality, and this is called the head-mounted display. And it's originally called the Sword of Damocles because it had this, huge big physical structure which was actually mounted above that would send down the signals to the left and right eye so that you would get a stereo image, and it projected a wireframe 3D image of a room onto your left and right eye, so you felt like you were somewhere else. And this was a huge breakthrough in virtual reality. But of course in the 1960s computers weren't powerful enough to create the kind of worlds that we might want to create in a virtual environment. And it took a long time for computers to become powerful enough. In the 70s, we had the introduction of 3D graphics, and a lot of the technology for developing and a lot of the mathematics for doing 3D graphics was invented in the 1970s. And I'll just show you this really short video of really the state of the art in 3D graphics in 1972. And you can compare this, for example, with something like the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation. None of this was real time, by the way. What you had to do is set up this world, the computer would go off and render these images, and then you came back like a couple of days later and you got these images. This is the state of the art in 3D graphics in 1972. It's still quite impressive. But just think how far we've come in terms of interactive 3D graphics in the last 40 years. Be able to give them to somebody else so somebody else could experience something that you experienced. So think about that, right? And think about, this is in a movie in 1983, and think about what has happened to the other things that we've seen in movies. This technology is probably going to come within our lifetimes. The computer game Elite, and then Star Trek The Next Generation, which of course had the holodeck. And I'll show you a couple of examples of things. There are some examples of these vector graphics games that I was talking about. And I'm going to skip through this video and instead show you this little scene, which was, I guess, how people imagined virtual reality would work in the future. Who's seen Star Trek The Next Generation? Okay. Who's seen Star Trek either of the two recent movies? Alright, so they don't have virtual reality in these, but this is how virtual reality might work.
You're like someplace to play some music for the lights. Jazz. Circa 1958.
Location.
Kansas City. No. No, it's Bourbon Street.
So watch what he's doing. He's telling the computer what kind of scenario he wants, and then the computer creates a virtual world, and he's able to move freely through the virtual world. There's AI for the characters in this virtual world, so he can interact with people. Of course, this is a simulation. This isn't real. This is just from a TV program.
Very good indeed.
Can somebody just tell me, is there a little red light on the back of that video camera?
Now, a trio.
On the screen.
Right. So then we move into the 1990s. And in the 1990s it became possible to do much more realistic 3D graphics. So this is an example of what 3D graphics look like at the 1990s. So we're able to do textured 3D polygons at this stage. And also there's an example of that game up there. What game is that? I think think it's actually Wolfenstein. So it's one of the first 3D, first-person perspective games. And interestingly then as well, a very famous and important movie came out, a movie called Lawnmower Man, which I'm going to show you a very short clip from. And this was the first example of a movie which, to a certain extent, tried to realistically capture what virtual reality was going to be like. So it had head-mounted displays and 3D simulated worlds. There's a lot of crazy stuff in here as well. The idea that you can become intelligent by playing virtual reality games, which I don't know if it's entirely true, maybe it is. But I'll just show you this so you can get a sense for, this is what people imagine virtual reality would look like. And it's quite a long clip, so I might just skip through some of it to get to the interesting bits.
From the imagination comes the story of a man
Come on, boy, let's go. Grab me, wait.
with the mind of a child.
Yeah, Cyberman, he came to see me.
Cyberman. That's right.
Yeah, Cyberman.
And the doctor
Virtual reality holds a key to the evolution of the human mind.
with a vision of the future.
I have a game in my house tonight I can play. Would you like that?
Yeah. Okay.
So hope you can get a sense, you know, this is what the vision of virtual reality was in 1993. Head-mounted displays, motion tracking, and in fact, you know, this is how they imagined we would solve the problem of how to move around in a 3D world. By sort of being, you know, wrapped in this sort of physical structure that would allow you to move around and translate your movements into a 3D world.
You just graduated to the next level, Joe.
Anyway, so some crazy fluke here. He actually ends up gaining all kinds of magical powers from the virtual world, which translate into the real world, which of course doesn't really happen. I mean, I don't think you play something like Far Cry or Crisis, where you're nanosuit and then suddenly find you've got nano powers in the real world. It doesn't really happen. But it does in movies. Look at that, even gains psychic powers. Anyway, very important movie. And then, of course, this is what 3D graphics looked like in the 90s. This is a game. Does anybody know what this game is called? It's called Descent. Alright, so it was a full 3D immersive game. Graphics are quite primitive by today's standards. And of course, this one, very, very important in the history of 3D games. What is it? Afternoon, it is Quake. So it's the first game to use hardware accelerated 3D graphics. Who made this game? What's the name of the company that made this game? Huh? A company called ID Software, right? And the guy that made this game, the guy that's behind this game is a guy called John Carmack. John Carmack is then the CTO of the company that makes the Oculus Rift. So he really is betting big time that virtual reality is the future. And of course in the late 90s, this very, very interesting movie came out. I'll just show you a really quick clip from it. What is it? Matrix. Really interesting movie because it threw up a lot of philosophical questions. If we're able to create these immersive, realistic 3D virtual simulations, what's to say we're not living in one right now? How could you even tell? And that was the idea behind The Matrix, and that was why it was such an interesting movie.
Have you ever had a dream that you were so sure it was real? One thing I want to know from that dream, how would you know the difference between a dream and a real?
It's the question that drives us here.
What is the difference? It is the world that has been opened your eyes to blind you. You are a slave born into a prison for your mind.
The Matrix is a system, Leo. That system is our enemy.
Trying to realize the truth. There is no truth.
Human beings are disease. Cancer is part plague. Cure. So you're here to save the world, trying to free your mind. But I can only show you the truth. You're the one who's to walk free.
It seems as you've been
Two minds.
I've seen an agent. What are you trying to tell me?
based on an idea which has been a part of human philosophy for actually centuries. It's called the simulation hypothesis. I think it's very well expressed in that cartoon on the right side. Look at that. A brain in a jar. The brain, from the brain's perspective, I'm walking outside in the sun, but it's actually just a computer simulation feeding signals into the brain. Who's to say that's not what we're doing right now? Anyway, in the 2000s, not a lot happened in the world of, virtual reality for a long time, because after movies like The Lawnmower Man, it took a long time for technology to catch up with what the imagination wanted to create. And, but research continued in universities, in particular in a place called CMU, Carnegie Mellon. And there's a very, very interesting movie which I'll send on to you guys from a researcher called Dr. Randy Pausch, who's now dead. He died of liver cancer 2 months after making his very famous lecture called The Last Lecture. It's all about how to live your life. It's a really inspiring talk. But they had this really interesting course called Building Virtual Worlds. And maybe, just in the interest of time, I might just skip over the video. It's just an example of one of the little videos that one of the students made on that course. But then, in August 2012, something very exciting happened for people interested in virtual reality. A gentleman called Palmer Luckey, who's a virtual reality researcher, started a Kickstarter campaign for the first consumer virtual reality headset, which became the Oculus Rift. And people were so inspired by his Kickstarter campaign, I can't remember how much he was looking for, but he ended up being massively oversubscribed with the Kickstarter campaign. And I'll just show you a little bit of his Kickstarter campaign video. Oh, sorry. I meant to turn the volume up.
My name is Palmer Luckey, and I'm a virtual reality enthusiast and the designer of the Rift. Games are something I'm really passionate about, and even more than playing games, I'm passionate about bringing games to the next level. What we're doing at Oculus is trying to create the world's best virtual reality headset, designed very specifically for gaming. Where this all started was in my parents' garage in Long Beach, California. And I was interested in stereoscopic displays, I was interested in head mounts, and the problem was there was nothing that gave me the experience that I wanted, the Matrix, where I could plug in and actually be in the game. And I was sure that somewhere out there was something that I could buy. And the reality is there's nothing. I set out to change that with the Oculus Rift. The magic that sets the Rift apart is immersive stereoscopic 3D rendering, a massive field of view, and ultra-low latency head tracking. John Carmack is one of the best developers in the world. The Doom, Quake, Commander Keen. Carmack saw some of my work. That's originally when he reached out to me.
Think of population, maker crowd. This is going to be awesomely cool work. What got me on is I honestly think the best VR demo probably the world's ever seen. We're still going to take this to working just 5 years.
We're getting involved in Oculus now because we see an incredible opportunity here for game developers to experience
In person, to create the Oculus.
A whole new industry. If anybody's going to tackle these hard problems, it's one that I've seen left.
Game. So most consumer head-mount displays have a diagonal field of view of about 30 or 40 degrees. You see a really small image way off in the distance, and it doesn't make you feel like you're there. With the Oculus Rift, you get a diagonal field of view of 110 degrees. That means you're not looking at a screen anymore. You actually feel like you're inside of the world.
You don't see the screen when you put it on your eyes, and that just changes the whole ballgame.
One of the biggest problems with virtual reality up to this point is latency. The benefit of the Rift is that it's designed to be really, really low latency. So rather than looking like this and you turn your head and then it follows, it actually follows with your view, no matter what you do.
There are 2 reasons why.
Okay, let's skip on, right? Because not just we're going to look at the specs of it, but I'm going to get some of you guys to try out the Oculus Rift, okay? So, that's the Oculus Rift. And you can currently buy a developer kit for the Oculus Rift. They'll be released more or less at the end of next year. It has, at the moment, the specs are 1280 by 800 pixels, So it uses the same type of screen that a smartphone uses. And the screen is divided into two. One for the left eye, one for the right eye. So essentially the scene is rendered twice, once for each eye. Most importantly, when you put the Oculus Rift on, you don't see the rest of the world and you don't see the edges of the screen. You just see the world, the virtual world. So it's an incredibly immersive experience, and it really freaks people out when they try it. In fact, some people can't do it. There's a thing called rift sickness that some people suffer from, and it's this disconnect between what your body is telling you and what your eyes are telling you. So your eyes are telling you you're in a 3D world, you're moving around, you can look around, see everything, but your body's not physically moving, so it makes you feel a little bit sick, right? One of the big problems with the current generation Oculus Rift is it doesn't do position tracking. So you move your head, and it's tracking your head movements, but when you walk, it doesn't track your movements. And even if you physically move, it doesn't track your movements. But that's one of the problems that they're currently working to solve. And how I solved that was by using a Kinect to do skeletal tracking. So it tracks your position using the Kinect and projects it onto the Oculus Rift screen. And then just looking at the Kinect, right? So the Kinect is, how many people have a Kinect in this room? Alright, so the Kinect I think is really interesting because most of the games for the Kinect, they don't really suit the hardcore gamer type. There's quite a lot of latency in the Kinect, and so it hasn't really reached up to its potential, even though it's a very popular device. But for people like me that like figuring out how things work and programming and hacking things together, the Kinect is awesome, because you can do skeletal tracking really easily with the Kinect. And people have done lots of really cool projects with the Kinect, like this one, which is a DJ project. Video, you can get a sense for some of the potential for motion tracking using the Kinect. And of course the Xbox One has a much more powerful sensor, and it's going to be able to do much more accurate 3D simulations. Right, time to do something very risky. It's time to get somebody up to have a go. So I'm looking for a volunteer. You were first with your hand up. Come up. So, first thing I'm going to let you have a go of is something that doesn't require any movement, right? So I'm just going to use one of the pre-built Rift demos, and what I need to do is if you can sit down here and put on the Oculus Rift headset, right? This is a thing called a Rift Coaster. What's your name? Mark, is it? Do you got a fear of heights? Do you ever get car sick or seasick? That's okay, you'll be alright then? Alright. So what I'm going to do is plug the Rift in here. So, one second. Interestingly, this demo is not running at its full potential, right? Because this is actually running on my MacBook Pro, which is not a terribly powerful computer. What I'm going to do here is plug this computer, so it's just difficult to get everything to display at one time. So what I need to do is plug this in here. And then I'm going to webcam what you will see on the screen, right? Now this hopefully all going to work here. So I'm going to do the Rift Coaster demo here, okay? So just give me 2 seconds. Start up the exe. So can you see the screen? Do you see like lots of stuff on the screen?
Yeah, it's a bit blurry.
Perfect. It's meant to be a bit blurry, right? So I'm going to run this. If all goes well, this is a very high risk thing. You should be actually riding a roller coaster. A minute. And then I'll project onto the screen. Oh, great, it's all working. So, okay. So you can see what he's seeing. Oh, sorry. Time out. So look around, look up, look down. So you can look all the way down and you can see you're going up, higher and higher. Good. Roller coaster? Okay, thanks for coming up. All right, give him a clap. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you, and I'm going to show you a short video of this first, because it's hard to fully appreciate this. I'll show you the video first, and then I'll get somebody else to have a go. But one of the big problems with all these Rift simulations is there's no skeletal tracking. So I'll show you what I made over the summer. I wanted to do something which gave you a virtual body, so that when you're using this little simulation, you can hold your hands up in front of your face and you can see your virtual hands, right? And also, you can interact with physical objects as if they were real objects. So when you hit things with your hands, they actually go shooting off into different directions. So I used a thing called a physics engine for this. And I'll show you a short video of this before I give you the demo. And I'll get somebody up to interact with this. Oh, hang on. Let's make the screen come on first. So I'll show you the video, and then I'll get somebody to interact with it, right? This is called BGE. And this uses a lot of different technologies together to really immerse you in their virtual world, and I think quite a unique way, right? This is a demo, so you can see on the screen what the person sees on their eyes. Skeletal tracking. It uses bullet physics engine for rigid body simulation, and projected. Can you turn the lights down a little bit just for this bit? As you can see, I'm able to move my hands. I'm wearing the Rift at the moment, so it looks to me like when I raise my right hand, I've got a virtual hand in front of me. When I raise my left hand, I've got a virtual left hand. And I look down and I can see my body. So when I physically move my legs, it looks like my avatar in the game also moves. So I can walk forward. When I walk forward, you see the Kinect is tracking the position. So now I'm able to interact with these physical objects. I actually move my hands in the real world, in the virtual world. So I can knock things around like that, and I can even kick things around with the feet. So a couple of other things I've got working in this demo. You can pick things up. So if I point at something with my left hand and press the right trigger button, I'm able to pick up this body. Bring it over to me, take a good look at it. As you can see, I move my physical hand, virtual hand, the word moves, so I control it, and just with a throw gesture. So I can also fire some little projectiles here, so I have a right hand gun, and I have a left hand gun, which just fires some rigid body balls. And then I can spawn some things in the world as well. So if I press this button here, I'm just going to ball. If I press this one here, I actually get random 3D objects from the computer game Elite installed into the world. So that is Space Station from the computer game Elite. So I can pick that one up, take a good look at it. You can see that there's ambient spec there and a few lighting on this one. Okay. Time for somebody to have a go. So I'm looking for somebody that has previously used, yeah, you come up, right? You stood up. So have you ever used an Xbox controller? That's very important. Okay, so here's the Xbox controller. Put on the headset here. Now, it's going to take me a minute or two just to set up, right? This is a standing demo, so you need to stand up. And in fact, this is kind of dangerous because you're actually on a stage here, so no problem. I'll keep an eye on you. I'll make sure you don't die. Huh? Oh yeah, just tighten it up and get yourself set up there while I get the little demo working for you, okay?
Is there any other more chances to do it? Yeah, just drop it.
So I'll give you some instructions, and this is, I suppose, flaky-ish, right? So this might not work as well as the previous demo. But what I need to get you to do, I'll maybe explain it for you. Is that comfortable for you now? Can you see anything on the screen there? It should be kind of all blurry and mixed up. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to run this demo. And here, actually, you need to hold this in your right hand, first of all, okay? Now, I'm going to keep an eye on you to make sure you don't fall off the stage. I'll move this little cable because you will need to walk a little bit. right? So I'll run this here, put this thing on so you can see what he sees basically, hopefully. So I'll tell you what, if you can just follow my instructions very carefully in this demo, so make sure you don't fall off the stage, right? Hopefully it'll all work. Now, actually, before you do anything else, just wave your hands around. Yay, you're being tracked. So if you know how to use the, just walk forward a little bit. I think what is actually, here, let's make the screen come on so you can see it. Tell you what, I'm going to restart it because I'm not quite sure if it's tracked you correctly. It might have actually, oh, it's picked up me. Now, one thing you do is use the right stick on the Xbox controller there. So if your head is not aligned correctly with your body in this thing, yeah, you can see that you're firing little projectiles there. It's cool, you're getting really into this. Awesome. Now, once this is working, you make this full screen. Just 1 second until I make this screen. Video, computer in. Yeah, great. So just try walking forward. Actually, just try holding your hand on the book in front of your face, right? So you can see that you basically have these virtual hands, right? And you can see that as you move your real hands, your hands move in the VR scene as well. And you can walk forward and maybe walk backwards a little bit because you're gonna, yeah. Now, if you can use the right trigger and look down at the ground, you'll be able to spawn some virtual objects. You'll be able to make things appear. So use, oh sorry, the right trigger is to pick up, right? Use the, like the A thingy keys to spawn some things, and you'll see that you're making little 3D cars there. So don't forget, none of this exists in the real world, but as far as, sorry, what's your name? As far as Jeffrey is concerned, he can see all this happening around him. And like I say, you got the virtual arms, virtual hands. Try the various other keys. In fact, you can even try, oh, you're picking something up, man, you're great at games. You've obviously played a lot of computer games. You know exactly what you're doing. Take a look up above and take a look, you know, to the left and right, and you'll see that it's tracking your position and your orientation. And again, notice that you have virtual hands as well, so you can pick up things, you can knock against things in the scene, and you can create all these sort of virtual objects. And in fact, one thing I'm going to do here to make it slightly better is I'll just press this key here to get rid of the hood. So can everybody see that? You get a kind of a sense of what it's like. It's program art. Actually, if you just crouch down and the Kinect should pick up your crouching, yeah, there you go, teabagging. Alrighty, cool. So look, I'm gonna pull you out now, okay? Alright, cool, great job. I'm really relieved that that worked. Okay, what did it feel like?
Is there any more demonstration?
Let's see if we have time. These things working? Hello? No. Can you turn these on? What? Okay, maybe just for the benefit of everybody, tell me what it felt like.
It felt amazing.
Did it feel real?
What?
Did it feel real?
Yeah, it did.
Cool. All right, great. Thank you. So, actually, even though that, oh, we got the screen working again. That's great.
Oh.
Cool. Alrighty, so, actually, thank you. So you can see what I was trying to do. I mean, this is all quite primitive in a way. This is day zero for virtual reality. All that stuff that I demoed, all the stuff that I made, that's all up and it's free and people can contribute to the project. It's up on a thing called GitHub. So you can download it and contribute it to that project as well. This is what my students are doing with the technology at the moment. So I have 4 final year projects for people that are using this technology to do cool things. So number 1, I have a student that is developing a deformable physics simulation. So you might notice in computer games, when cars crash and things, they deform in very realistic ways. So I have a student who's working on an Oculus Rift implementation of that, so that you can feel the power of being able to kind of destroy things. You know, you can bring things together, crush them, and they'll deform in a realistic way. I have another student who's doing a car simulation, because it's dangerous to learn how to drive. So wouldn't it be great if you could just do it in a virtual car and you could drive out on the road with other cars, pedestrians, cyclists, and learn how to drive that way. You look over your shoulder, you can see the left mirror, the right mirror, the hood, and he's using a 4-speedback steering wheel as well. I have another student who's doing a self-defense training simulation. So you'll be able to experience what it's like to get mugged and be able to fight off the person who's mugging you, and you can learn various different self-defense techniques. And finally, I have a student who's doing a really cool project, a procedural 3D universe. So being able to fly around from planet to planet and, you know, experience different alien lives and things like that. I'll just show you a really quick demo. This is my student, Rihanna, who is using the Kinect to do skeleton. So Rihanna, as you can see, is using the Kinect to do skeletal tracking. She'll be able to put these animations into a 3D simulation, and this will be all of the different people that you have to fight off. So I want to just finish up by talking about the future for this technology. So the version of the Rift and the technology that I showed you today is the developer kit version, and there's a lot of limitations with it. But the consumer version for this will be out next year. And you know, it's going to be a 1080p screen. So number one, it'll be a much, much higher resolution screen, 4 times as many pixels. Second of all, it'll have position tracking built in, so you won't need a Kinect or other technology to do the position tracking. It'll be wireless as well. You know, one of the big limitations is you've got to be tethered all the time to use this. It will probably have a built-in Android operating system, so you won't even need to connect it to a PC. You'll be able to download Rift experiences straight to the device. Within 5 years, we'll have 4K screens. So screens with so realistic that you won't be able to tell if it's real or not. You know, the moment you can see the pixels, but you won't be able to see the pixels in the 4K versions of the Rift. Yeah. And then there's lots of people working on different techniques for doing tracking with positions. And this is a very, very interesting project called Pyro. And again, just imagine what you could do with this technology. So this is using wireless orientation and position trackers that you attach to your body. See how amazingly immersive this is, and there's no latency. You're literally moving in the physical world, and you're moving in the game world as well. And it's projected onto the screen in stereo, so you feel like you're there. Actually, that's not the video I wanted to demo. This is the one I wanted to show you. This is using the latest version of the Unreal Engine, which is a 3D game engine that's used in loads and loads of commercial games. One of the great things about this is you can be a fat person in real life, and in the virtual world you can be thin. Or you can be him. Watch, he is moving, but this is what he sees. He is this person in the virtual world. Imagine being able to play your favorite computer games from a real first-person perspective, that your actual movements are being tracked, that you feel like you're in the middle of the game, living these areas. Maybe 1 or 2 more demos if we have time, right? This is what I want to finish up with. Does everybody know what this is from? Who hasn't seen this movie? Put up your hand. Okay, you should watch this movie, right? The reason why you should watch this movie is because I think it's a very important movie. And once you play with the Oculus Rift and virtual reality technology, then this movie becomes not so much a fantasy, but a real vision of what the future holds for human civilization and humanity. And the question I think this movie poses, and the question virtual reality poses, and I've mentioned this already, is what if none of us are actually here right now? What if I am actually an old man, an 80-year-old man, and I'm actually reliving my life wearing a very advanced version of the Oculus Rift, reliving my best experiences? How would I even know that? Thank you. I am. So, that's what virtual reality holds, and it makes you have those kind of questions, you know. The interesting thing is, you have also got a choice, right? This technology is coming whether we like it or not. I predict that within 10 years, architects will be using this to model the cities of the future. You'll be able to have all kinds of amazing experiences. You'll be able to go on holidays by sitting in your room and wearing an Oculus Rift. You'll be able to visit all kinds of exciting places. You'll really feel like you're there. You can be the person that just uses those, that experiences other people's dreams and experiences other people's fantasies. Or you can be the person that makes those fantasies for other people. And how you do that is by studying computer science. So computer science is the way you understand how all of this thing works. And for me, I know which one I want to be. I want to be the person who is in control of this technology, rather than being a person who gives my power away to other people to make it for me. So that's why you can take the red pill or the blue pill. The red pill means you know how it works. The blue pill means you just use it and you're happy to experience other people's dreams. And if you wanted to get started doing virtual reality, there's loads of free tools, and we have lots of different opportunities for events here you can come to at the DIT. On the 7th of December, we host a computer games design workshop for about 200 secondary school students. Your career guidance teachers will have received the poster for that. There's still about 100 places left on that. There's 300 places on the workshop, right? There was 150 places left yesterday. We have the DIT Open Day on the 7th of December and the DIT Computing Academy, where you can learn to write programs in a language called processing, which is basically what real computer programmers do. So that's it. Thank you very much for your time. Here, do you want to take the microphone? I can figure out how to work it. Green, yeah, here.
I wouldn't think it was called so it's out in a year or so.
$300. That's how much the dev kit costs. Yeah, if you can pass the microphone around there, there's a couple of microphones. There's another one somewhere. Where did that? Yeah.
Hey, look.
There's one for this side and one for that side. Yeah.
One problem I think I have with this is, will it lead to any like mental disorders like paranoid or something like that?
Yeah, I predict that it will. You know, there's computer game addiction already, and of course there's internet addiction, people that spend too much time on Facebook. So I'd say a certain percentage of people, particularly those that, you know, maybe schizophrenia, etc., are probably going to find this just too much. And yeah, I'm sure you will eventually find people who more or less spend their whole lives in the virtual world. As currently happens, you people that spend all their lives in World of Warcraft. Imagine if you could actually be the character you play in World of Warcraft. So I'd say there will be issues like that. Definitely. Anybody else wants to ask a question? Yeah. Yeah, so your question was about how you move around a big world in a small room. Guys, can you just be quiet there for a second? We'll just do the last few questions here. And that's a really good question. Huh? There is. There's a thing called the omnidirectional treadmill.
It's on a spin place that when you walk, you can't move.
Yeah, you got it exactly. So there's an omnidirectional treadmill that has been developed. It's like an ordinary treadmill, but it's a round treadmill, so you can walk around. I actually have a video of it there, and you don't physically walk up, so it's designed for small rooms. But I imagine a lot of people will want to make holodeck type experiences where you actually need a physically large space to move around. Eventually, who knows, maybe instead of using goggles and physically moving, we'll have a little port on the back of our necks, which you see in a lot of science fiction movies, and it will directly plug into our brains. But that's a long time away. Anybody else want to ask a question? Yeah?
Would you ever use a program at all?
Sorry, say again?
Would you ever use a program at all?
Would you be able to use it for what?
Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, definitely. I think Grand Theft Auto would be great using the Oculus Rift. You know, there are lots of PC games which have already kind of been riffing in. For example, Half-Life 2. All the Valve games like Team Fortress 2 you can play with the Oculus Rift. Anybody else want to ask a question, or are we done? Okay, maybe I'll do one more Rift demo then. Who's first up with your hand? Right, you stood up, so you're up. What's your name?
I was going to ask the question. That's fine. I was going to ask the question. Can you do another one? Yeah, I'll be able to fall on stage. Yeah. Make me and me.
Okay, so this is guys, just be quiet for a second. This is a very nice demo. It's called the Pre-Boat. It's a music demo, okay? So I'll put the screen up so you guys can see as well. Let's turn the sound up a little bit. Can you, can't hear any sound. Is the sound turned off? This is actually no fun without the sound. The sound is...